Well, obviously you people are the ones who haven't figured out that Dr. Carlson's speaking at Memorial and Dr. Alan Lindsay is over in Ladies' Chapel. And so please, if you've only just figuring that out now, can you sort of cough a bit and, like this as if you're going for a drink as you exit? But anyway, it's nice to have you here. And it's nice to be here with you. And I'm hoping that what I have to say, someone here needs to hear. I studied at Ballarat University down in Victoria. Do you think this is cold? And anyway, I have this distinct, there was in our first year, I was doing teacher training, and so we had to do educational psychology, which I hated. Actually hated educational psychology, and part of the reason was because our psychology lecturers were a bit nuts. I don't know whether that's just a common thing. Obviously, none of the psychology lecturers that we know are nuts, but the ones there were. And I remember this particular occasion where at the beginning of one of the lectures, we had like a big lecture theatre, would have been as big as this, and it had the tiered seating. There was sort of two aisles that came down from the top. And one of the guys, his name was Darren, so he was a really nice guy. And he was the president of the association for the PE students. And he got up, it was about 5 minutes before the lecture started. So he got up and he's just standing up the front of the lecture, just giving just general announcements, really benign stuff. He's just saying, hey guys, just letting you know, there's going to be like a touch footy competition on Sunday, this Thursday night. Just some of these comments when all of a sudden the lecturer for the class, it was the psychology class, walks in, and he entered the back, and he had his little kit worth of stuff that he's going to talk about. Anyway, I don't know what he thought, but he stopped up the back there, and he looked down, and there was this, Darren's, his name was Shrek. His surname's Shrek. This was years before Shrek came out. I often wonder, if you have a name like that and then a movie comes out, he's probably heard, someone said, hey, there's a movie coming out called Shrek. And he's probably gone, yeah, it's going to be like a Gladiator or a Braveheart. And instead it's an animated ogre. But anyway, so there's Shrek. He's standing at the front, just doing this thing. And this lecturer walks in at the back and then looks down, and I don't know what went through his crazy mind, but he's just gone, hey! Like this, just screamed, like seriously screamed. And we're all sitting there looking down down in our seats at Shrek, and everyone just turns around, and there's this psychology lecturer holding his gear, just looking, and then pointing at Shreky down the front. He goes, hey! Like this, he does it again, and we're like, what's going on here? And anyway, Shreky's like, he's a bit overwhelmed by this as well. And then this psychology lecturer, I remember he screams out, he goes, who do you think you are? Like this to Shreky. And Shreky is a bit of a larrikin. He's sitting there, he's like, and then he sort of pauses and he goes, Bond. James Bond. Like this. Anyway, this lecturer, I remember he just grabs his stuff and he goes, doof, and he throws it on the floor and then starts sprinting down the aisle. And Shreky just goes, no, this, and he just gives us the wave, and he's out the other side, sprints up the hall, out the door. The lecturer went down, up through the stairs, and they disappeared. The lecturer was called off. Shreky said it took him a good 15 minutes, and he was a good runner to shake this dude. He ended up by having to hide under a table in another lecture theatre. So anyway, the moral of the story. I always think about this, this guy pointing and saying, who do you think you are? And I wonder, who do you think you are? In fact, if you had to turn to the person beside you and tell them who you are, and I'm going to get you to do it, go for it. What do you say? He must have said something nice, Annie, because she smiled. How do we greet? We normally, we introduce ourselves. Oh, hi, I'm Darren. That sort of superficial stuff. And then you might tell, if they dig a bit deeper, oh, yeah, I teach at Avondale College. I'm married to one wife, got 3 kids. Oh, these are my interests. We talk about this kind of stuff. But I'm really intrigued by this notion of who do we think we are? How do we see ourselves? And how do we respond to a question like that? Because this thing, who we see, how we see ourselves, who do we think we are, is often referred to as this notion of our identity. And our identity, I'm going to show you, can have a tremendous impact on how you experience life. And we get this sense of identity, this sense of who we think we are from various places. We get it from things like this. From our body image. Now, see? He wasn't mucking around. Kids, are you seeing this? He wasn't mucking around. And I know what you're thinking, hey, wait a sec, there's something doesn't add up here. Black is very slimming, people. All right, so, for many people, there's a huge element of this, particularly during those teen years. I don't look in the mirror for an hour every morning. Hardly would even do half an hour, probably. We're very much caught. And you watch guys go down to the gym and we pump. And in gyms, there's two things. There's two mandatory pieces of equipment in a gym. One are the weights, and what's the other one? The mirrors, of course, because we really, guys, I'm going to break your bubble here, but we go down there. When you do weights, and I can tell you this with authority, you get this thing called transient hypertrophy, or this pump sensation. So I see your muscles pump up, and we sit there going, right, we don't let people watch us doing it, but it's like, well, you just cast a glance, woohoo, yeah, right, and then you see us, we walk out, it's like we go to the door and sort of turn sideways to get through, we keep walking out like this. What we don't realise is that, a short time, and I'm talking sort of probably, 7 or 8 minutes, our muscles go back down to the stick arms that we had before we walked in there. But it doesn't matter because we have this overinflated sense of ourselves in our heads. We carry with us around till we come to the gym the next time where we can pump up once again. So, guys, bad news. We probably don't quite look as good in real life as what we think we do in our heads. Ladies, I've got some good news for you. Do you know ladies actually probably look better in real life than they do in their heads? Most women have an underrated impression of how good they actually look. Most women think they're bigger than they are in real life. So ladies, the news is all good for you. But body image can be a huge thing for many people in terms of how they see themselves. For others, it's sporting prowess. And anyone who knows me knows that that's not me. Because A, I can't jump. B, I'm useless at basketball. In fact, we had is Wolf Pinch in here? No, he's not here. He's probably one of the interesting speakers. He and I were on a team, and my wife actually made us. We had a college basketball staff team, years and years back. Sarah made us these shorts. I don't know if you still remember the shorts, Sarah. They fitted two of me in one pair, and we all had these. Wilf is shorter than me, so you can imagine couldn't tell whether they were sort of short longs or long shorts, but they came down about here, and we used to just run around on the court, and I had a great time, and I was really good as long as no one passed the ball to me. I could run up and down lots, and just like as soon as it went to me, I went, get rid of that thing. Anyway, sporting prowess, for some of us, that's a big deal. We see ourselves, they're an athlete, or you're good at this, you're a basketballer, or you're a soccer player, or whatever you may be. For many, they're cyclists. For some of us, our sporting prowess, our sporting abilities is how we define ourselves. It defines a huge part of our identity. Others, it's our possessions. It's the things that we own. And this can be a huge part, for many people, how they build their worldview about who they are. We actually just bought a caravan, like an old caravan. We got this, only paid a few $1,000 for it, and we gutted the thing, and then we put bunks in it, and we took it on the maiden voyage just last weekend. We went down to Yamina Beach there, and I pull up like, I'm no longer a tenter, I'm a caravanner. And so I walk in there, we pop the top, and Sarah's decked it out. She even put little curtains in there. It's just so cute. You'd love it. You got to see it, Danny. Anyway, so and I'm just so proud. There we've got our caravan, and then all of a sudden I hear, whoa, 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 whoa. And this what are those vehicles? They're like about a Ford 250 thing, massive. And this dude is pulling a massive caravan. It's like bigger than my home on wheels. And he pulls up right beside us. It's like there's just space everywhere. And this dude pulls up right beside us. And I just go, And Caleb, my little guy, goes, Dad, our caravan doesn't look very good, does it? And I said, what, don't you like it? And he goes, looks horrible. But it's nice on the inside. He did say that, so that was very kind of him. Possessions though, the things that we own. This dude, he had everything. He pulls out, at the end of it, we're sitting there like, it was freezing cold. He pulls out a fire pit, right? I'm thinking, there's nothing this dude doesn't have. Anyway, possessions for many people is, we build our sense of identity and self-esteem around this. Others, it's our fashion. Now, I've got to tell you, this is actually me. And just to create the full effect here, this is blue velvet. A blue velvet suit. Blue velvet suit with the ruffles. Look at that little collar thing going on there. I actually should have got the whole picture because the pants are not pants, they're shorts. Blue velvet shorts. Mum, why did you do that to us? I'm still undertaking therapy, to get over this. Mum used to love to dress us up. I was going to show a picture of my brother, but he's worse, and that would have been really bad. But, Mum used to delight in dressing us like that. That was my sports uniform, by the way. Hey, see why I gravitated towards individual sports and not team sports? Would you pass a ball to that? That's why I can't play basketball. But, for many, our fashion sense, sometimes it's the people we know, isn't it? It's our connections. Oh, yeah, I know them and that. These people, sometimes they even name drop. Because by knowing that person, then all of a sudden it creates a sense of our self-worth, our sense of who we are. Sometimes it's the groups we belong to. And isn't it true that our groups we belong to and we associate with can have a huge impact on us personally? In fact, there's some fascinating studies that have been done. I don't want to digress too much, but some of you may have heard about the Framingham studies that were started years ago. These were the studies that identified risk factors for heart disease and all the rest of it. But they've been following this. These studies started back in the 1950s. They've actually started following these people now for several generations. Do you know what they know? That things like obesity is socially contagious for up to 3 degrees of separation. So if someone in a social network actually becomes obese, there's a 10% chance that the friends of their friends will also become obese. The same goes for happiness. In a social network, happiness is socially contagious, up to 3 degrees of separation. And so the groups we belong with can have a huge impact on what we experience in our lives. They can have a huge impact on how we define ourselves and how we see ourselves, how we describe who we are. Some groups are not so great sometimes. Some groups are really good. Here I am, leader of the pack. That was. I'll tell you what. They were 3 of the best years of my life. Really, getting at the front of that peloton. I'll tell you what. It was, the wind blowing through my hair gown thing. Just awesome. My frock's going behind. And being up in front for once was just awesome. I mean, Sister Agatha, she had quite some legs on her. She could go if the sprint was on. But by and large, they were great times until that day they found out. But anyway, moving right along. This sense, I'm intrigued, I'm fascinated by this sense of how we see ourselves. How do we define who we are? How do we describe our identity? And while many of us build our identity and how we describe ourselves and define ourselves around these kind of things, when it happens like that, we're set up for failure. There's real problems that potentially can come our way because those things can and they do change. We can lose our body image. Our muscles can sag, and they do. We can get injured. And all of a sudden, it's intriguing for guys particularly. Girls aren't so vain. For us guys, there's this whole sporting thing is a big deal to us. It's like, and the older we get, the better we were, and all the rest of it. But I'm completely vain. I hang on to this stuff. I've actually been here at Avondale for this is my 21st year, and I actually haven't been beaten in a fun run. I can't play basketball, to save myself, but I haven't been beaten in a fun run or aquathon by a student yet. But do you know what? Every year, what happens? I say to Sarah, when I line up, when I know that it's my fitness class, the first class at the beginning of the year, every year I go, Sarah, this could be the year. And I go over there, and do you know what? This year, we actually met all of the phys ed students, and there's one guy who we all get together, and he says, and we said, oh, so what do you do? What sports do you play? And he says, oh yeah, I'm a runner. Instantly my ears prick up, and I'm thinking, how good a runner. And I said, so, what sort of distance? He goes, 5 or 10K. I'm going, right. How do you go? What sort of times do you run for that out of genuine interest? And then he starts rattling off these times, and I've just gone, this is the year. It all happens this year. And I remember going home to Sarah, and I said, this year, I'm gone. And your whole world is being shattered. Anyway, the morning, I got up that morning when we had our first run, and it was going to be all on, and this is when you get to test it out. And I front up, and I got out of bed and I said, Sarah, I'm no longer the man that you thought I was. And she's like, get over it. But anyway, I went there, and do you know what? I walked into this class ready for it to be on, and guess who should walk in on crutches with his ankle bandaged up? Thank you. It was him. Thank you. So anyway, for guys, our sporting prowess, our physical abilities, can mean a really big deal to us. For some, we lose our possessions. We lose our things. And this can be an incredibly traumatic experience, obviously, understandably. And it can rock our whole world of, who we are and our sense of identity. We can lose our friends. And this happens, doesn't it? We become disconnected from those people that we thought were close to us or thought cared about us. And all of a sudden, things start to, we feel alienated. And that can be incredibly destroying, for some people. And then last, but not least, of course, in time, we all grow old and we lose our good looks. I said, Sarah, I need a picture to represent this. And she said, that one will work fine. She didn't really. She's more loving than that. I'm intrigued by this. I'm intrigued by this sense of identity and where we get our sense of identity from. Because, studies have actually shown that our sense of identity, the strength by which you have an understanding of who you are, and what defines you, has an incredible influence on what you experience in your life. And it's illustrated by a fantastic study that some of you will be familiar with. This study was done in one of the islands of Hawaii. In this community, there is a lot of disadvantaged homes. There's a high level of domestic violence, low socioeconomic status. They know in this community, high teen pregnancy, a lot of drug and alcohol abuse and use. And so this particular study, this was commenced back in the 1980s. What they did is they picked a particular year and they said, we're going to look at the kids that are born in this island and we're going to follow them through. We're going to see, kids who start with this disadvantaged commencement to life, and all their surroundings, their environment really is setting them up for failure. What happens to them? And what's some of the predictors of that? And so they've actually been now following these kids for many, many years. And what's intriguing is about 1/3 of the kids that are born into this kind of world, right? This kind of environment where they've, as I said, a lot of violence, a lot of, crime, all the rest of it. About 1/3 of these kids actually come out to be quite functional, well-adjusted people. And so the researchers have been studying, what is it about them that actually allows them to achieve that? And this is the quote from actually not verbatim, but I'll put it up. It says this. It says, the resilient youngsters in our study all had at least one person in their lives who accepted them unconditionally, regardless of their temperamental idiosyncrasies. Did you have those during your teen years? Their physical attractiveness. Did you get pimples and zits during your teen years? Gary didn't, but all of us did. And then regardless of their intelligence. You know what it's saying? It's saying that they needed, and this is another word that these researchers use, they needed a charismatic adult in their lives who accepted them for who they are. Who was their cheer squad? Everyone needs a cheer squad in life. Regardless of when they do silly things, regardless of when they make poor decisions, regardless of if they just flunked out of that, regardless of this stuff, the kids who had this, bear in mind, these are kids who are coming from a disadvantaged community. Everything else is stacked against them. But these are the kids who had at least one significant other in their lives who accepted them unconditionally, regardless of their physical attractiveness, temperamental idiosyncrasies, or intelligence. When I read that, and and I look at that quote and I read, all had at least one person in their lives. And as I said, sometimes it's stated as one significant other in their lives that accepts them unconditionally. Do you know what? I can't help but think of the gospel. Because you know what strikes me is the whole essence of the gospel message is that you have a significant other that doesn't just accept you unconditionally, but loves you passionately, regardless of your screw-ups or your hang-ups or any of the other stuff that's going on in your life. You know, they love you, they accept you, they embrace you, not because of who you are, but because of whose you are. Simple as that. You know what? Someone who doesn't care what you own, how big your caravan is, doesn't care how good you are at basketball or not, doesn't care what you own, what your fashion statements, doesn't care about any of that stuff. That is absolutely inconsequential. You know, who loves you unconditionally because of who you are. It's as simple as that. And you know what? I actually believe, and the more I reflect on this is the transforming power of the gospel. You know, the power of the gospel, when people allow it, you know, and I don't know that we allow it to do enough. When people allow that fact, that reality that we are loved unconditionally, right? When you allow that to sink into the very depths of your psyche, that changes people's lives. That changes people's lives in incredibly powerful ways. In fact, what I believe is that Jesus is an identity whisperer. You know, Jesus is all about creating identity. And in fact, when I see him and the way he interacted and his time on earth was all about trying to create identity in people. Not identity based on things that were transient and could change and could set them up for failure, but things that were based on this sound foundation that would give people the ability to live and live well. Because you know what he doesn't want to see? We know that when people have their identity shaken, things go crazy for them. Very often. We talk about identity crisis. You know, we heard about the typical midlife crisis. You know, where all of a sudden a guy's driving around a sports car and he's got a new younger version of a girl and all the rest of it. You know, this is an identity crisis. These are often catalysed by when people have things happen in their lives where what they built their identity on gets rocked, and all of a sudden they go, whoa, and searching for meaning, they go in these other places. We know things like in retirement. I tell you, guys and women retiring. Do you know that depression's about 40% higher in retired men? Why? Because their whole world was often built around, this is what I do. This is what I do for a living. This is who I am. And when that's taken away, well, where do you go from there? You know, Jesus was all about, though, creating this really strong sense of identity. And I want to tell you just two Bible stories that I think really powerfully illustrates this. And the first one is that of Peter. You know, I love Peter. I actually really like Peter. But you know what I think all guys can probably identify with Peter to a certain extent. Because you know what Peter was? He was the man. You know, Peter was like, woohoo, yeah, let's get in there. Woo, woo, woo. He was sort of like the butt chest kind of guy. You know, it's like, all right, Jesus, they're going to come. All right, let's get it going. I've got the sword, and he actually, at times he would take action with it. You know, we know he did it in Gethsemane there. He was all the talk, wasn't he? It's like, what, Jesus? And Jesus says, this is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to, fold out, play. And it's play out. And he's like, nah, that's not the way it's going to happen. You know, because you're with the man. You know, I'm a fisherman. You know, we're strong. Look at us. Look at this. Woohoo! You know, so his whole identity was built about that. But you know what you see in Peter? A complete identity crisis, don't you? You know, this guy just gets absolutely obliterated. He just gets smashed. You know, everything that he prided himself on, that he saw himself as, I am the man, I'm the strong one, I'm the leader. And all of a sudden, Jesus says, really, you think so? Well, let me tell you what's going to happen, brother, is, you're going to deny me 3 times. Not just once, 3 times. And it's like, no way! But he does it. And, you could only imagine how decimated Peter must have been when he hit rock bottom there. And it's intriguing. What does he do? When he's just been absolutely smashed. there he is. So you can see him searching around, trying to pick up the pieces of his identity again. So what does he do? He actually goes fishing. I find that intriguing. It's like, I'll go back to what I used to know, that what I used to be good at. And that's where Jesus finds him. And what happens, though, when Peter's sitting, and you can imagine what Peter was like, and all of a sudden he sees Jesus there again. This dude is just full on, and I love that about his nature. It's like, bang, he's straight in the water, swimming over there, and he gets there. And Jesus, when Peter hits rock bottom, Jesus makes him the rock. And I love that. I love that. Jesus says, okay, you know what, Peter? We can start working with you now. Because your identity has been absolutely obliterated. It's no longer based on this. You're the man, you're all this stuff. Well, let me make you a rock, mate. Let me tell you who you are. You are the rock. And I'm going to build my church on this rock. Peter, complete identity transformation. And Jesus does amazing things through him. Another story, second story, Mary. This is probably one of my other favourite stories of the whole Bible because I think it just illustrates so powerfully the compassion and the love of Jesus. But here's the story. And I'm just going to read part of this. This is in John chapter 8. But this is how it reads. It says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. And how's this? They made her stand before the group and Jesus. They made her stand. So it's like, all right, drag this woman in. Now make her stand in front of everyone. Right? We want to stand her and say, this is who she is. Right? Here's her identity. Jesus, what do you say about that? Look, this is who she is. Stand her up. Make her. Put her up in front of. Don't hide it. Put her in front of everyone. And Jesus goes, you want to play that game? Well, let me tell you who you really are. And he stoops down and, as we understand, he starts to write the sins of the people around them. These people who were standing there, and what was their identity built on? I'm a Pharisee. I'm a teacher. Look at me. People respect me. Look at the way I'm clothed. This is who I am. And Jesus says, well, let me tell you who you really are. And he starts to write their sins, and one by one, these people turn and slink off. And you know what I love is that when Jesus turns to this woman, her identity, imagine that. Imagine how just flatline, just down, rock bottom she was. And Jesus, in effect, says, well, let me tell you who you really are. My daughter. You're a child of the King. And he lifts her up. And this woman, imagine the transformation that she encounters in her identity, in her self-worth, in who she sees that she is. No longer viewed as the scum of the earth, but as a daughter of the King, a citizen of the kingdom. So who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? A few years ago, I organised a group of some of our PE students. I said, let's go and run a fitness program for some of the guys over here at the South Lakes Refuge. They're in there for drug, alcohol, gambling, rehabilitation. So let's run a fitness program for them, right? An 8-week course. We'll give them a certificate at the end, just as something to do. Many of these guys had never had anything that built their sense of self-worth and that like this, but it was a fantastic experience, great thing. And at the end of it, the directors out there who do a fantastic job, they said, hey, come out on Thursday night. We actually have our worship program, right? Where these guys, many of them was either go to prison or come here, right? And so, this is a rough end of the crowd, but they come along to this worship program. And they give them the opportunity. We actually handed out the certificates there, and they were proud as punch. But they have the opportunity to come up the front and tell their story or tell something that's happened or some of the challenges they've had this week. And I'll never forget this. This one guy gets up and he walks up and he's a bit nervous, because obviously he's not used to getting up in front of his mates. And he stands there and he says, and he's sort of fidgeting. He says, I'm Steve. Right, they always start with that. Everyone goes, hi, Steve. And he goes, I'm Steve. And then they have this act of telling what they are. And he says, and I'm a drug addict, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a gambling addict as well. And then he says, but because of Jesus, I'm none of that, and I'm better than all of that. From now on, everyone is defined by Christ.